All right, so B2, very simple. On top, we have an Allen key, or an Allen bolt, I should say. Take that out. Now, there's also a plastic washer in there that you don't want to lose. Okay, so when you take that bolt out, make sure you got that plastic washer that goes with it as well. Okay. Now on our B2, we have, instead of 4 brushes, there's only 2. Okay, so we have top and the bottom. All right, you have a wire lead here, but you could take that off. And wire lead here on the bottom. Take that off as well. All right, then we have 4 screws that actually hold the brush holders in place. Okay, so we're going to use a Phillips head screwdriver. I'm just going to back these out. You don't want to use power tools with these brush blocks because you're putting a metal screw into a plastic housing. So you don't want to use a power tool because you could strip it out and potentially damage your brush block holder, or brush holder, I should say, and could be, you know, could make the difference of you getting something on the job done on time or not. All right, so we're just gonna lightly tap this out, just like that. And there's your brush holder with your brush. Okay, now on the back here you could see you have your wire lead. We're going to take that off. Okay, and we're just going to pull the brush out. Okay, now if you see in there, you see this is the spring behind the brush that keeps constant tension on it. Okay, and now I've talked about this a little bit. You see my fingers, see how they're kind of black? You could tell the difference between an OEM brush or an aftermarket brush based on how much that's actually graphite. And the graphite is that's in these brushes, the graphite content is what separates these OEM brushes from aftermarket brushes. Okay, a lot of times a lot of guys will say, oh, well, I could buy brushes for my B2 at, you know, half the price of the OEM stuff. You absolutely can, but what they, excuse me, the difference is that the aftermarket brushes don't have the same graphite content. Okay, and what the graphite content does is one of 2 things. A, it provides lubrication for the brush riding up against the commutator on the armature. Okay, and it also helps with heat dissipation. Okay, because with the lubrication, it keeps the heat of the armature down. When you have a higher carbon content like aftermarket brushes do, you're not going to get that. And especially with these plastic brush holders, when you use an aftermarket brush and you run into more heat, you could actually potentially melt your brush block. So that's why you want to stick with OEM brushes. Okay, putting them back in, all right, you just want to feed your wire lead right into there. Okay, make sure it goes beyond the brush spring. Feed it up just like that. Put your brush in. Lock your wire lead back on, just like that. Okay, you could see we got nice tension there. All right, now a lot of guys will ask me, when do you know to change your B2 brushes? Okay, so if you look at it, this is right about where it's gonna sit when it's on the armature. Okay, when your brush gets to about here, where you could see out the bottom here, that's right about when you want to change out your brushes. You know, if you don't see any of your brush like there, okay, like if your brush is like that and you don't see any of your brush behind here, that's a good indicator that you want to change out your brushes. Okay, I like to do it right about there. Okay, that's my go-to. All right, a little bit of maintenance goes a long way with your machines. Take care of the machines that make you a bunch of money. Right, so putting these back in, you want to put pressure here, slide it in on an angle and twist it up just like that. Gonna line up those 2 studs, and I just use a small flathead screwdriver, and I'll come in, stand it up like this so you guys can see. I'll come in just underneath the brush block and I'll just lift it up. Okay, what I see a lot of guys do is they'll actually put the screws in and then use a screw gun and try and pull the brush block up into the head here and have the screws pull it up. You don't want to do that because, like I said before, these are metal screws going into a plastic housing. So you don't want to do that because you run the risk of seriously damaging your equipment doing that. Okay, so we're just going to put these back in. It's going to be the same for the back side, changing out your B2 brushes. Nothing different. Tighten this up. All right, now we got that tight. Put our wire leads back on. Moonshine, that's my water. It's like, I don't know, it's hot here today, man. All right, so now we got our brushes in. You go put your cap back on. If you're gonna do a little bit more maintenance, I typically like to keep the cap off until I'm ready to turn the machine back on. Sometimes I'll use when I put new brushes in, especially if I get a new armature, which your authorized service center will do this for you. They actually use a commutator stone, and they'll actually seat the brushes for you. Okay. I like to, when I just change out the brushes on a job site, I like to leave the cap off just so I can see where the brushes are sitting. So what I'm going to do is now I'm actually going to turn this on real quick. Throw the bag on here. You guys will actually be able, well, I don't know if you'll actually be able to see or not, but what I'm looking for is right where the brush sits on the armature. Okay, I'm looking for the arc pattern. Okay, and what I'm looking for is just a straight, clean line all the way across. So I'm just going to turn this on real quick. And that's it. Our brushes are good. So RJ just said he's got some grease leaking out of his out of the screw underneath the light. So I'm going to take this off and I'll show you. I don't know if it's anything. No problem, Tony. I love this. So if you guys ever have questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. RJ, I don't know if it's anything to worry about. I would look into it. Here we just have our little seal. It's like a heat shield. Okay, so you're going to take that off. Take our light bulb off just to be safe. You don't want to hit it with a screwdriver or something, potentially break it. Just trying to do the right thing, and then you just create more problems for yourself, right? So this is actually the grease fitting, okay? So as you can see here, this is basically a brand new edger. But RJ, what color grease do you have in your edger? Just out of curiosity. Either way, the new ones come with red grease. And what actually happens is it's a heat-sensitive grease. So what happens is when you're using your edger, it'll actually liquefy and get into all the gears and make sure everything's properly lubricated. And sometimes when you when you go and you haven't used your edger in a while, you open up that bottom gear. You open up that bottom gear housing down there, and it'll look hard. It's actually, what happens is when you don't use it, it actually stiffens up a little bit. It's when it heats up that'll actually break down a little bit and start lubricating everything. Okay, RJ, if you don't know, you probably have yellow grease in there. When's the last time you brought in for service? Red grease is what all the edgers come with new. Any service center, if they're doing any work down here, say you had doing a jack shaft or something along those lines, they're going to put the red grease in there. Okay. So I'll show you guys how to take off an edger pad, and I'll show you where to get access to the grease. RJ, what I would tell you is one of the main reasons why grease comes out of that bolt is typically because it gets overfilled with grease. People put too much grease in it, whatever the cause may be. Sometimes just over time, you know, if you haven't had it apart or anything like that, it could just be grease working their way out. There is a little pinhole in that access screw there, and it's actually made so that air can pass in and out, so it could actually breathe. So sometimes grease does find its way in there and work its way out. So I don't think it's anything to really worry about. If it starts coming out excessively, then that's obviously a different story. But a little bit here and there really isn't an issue. Okay, so what we want to do is here, we want to lock up our fan. Okay, when we take off our EDGER pad, we're going to do is here, we're going to lock up our fan. Okay, so this way the armature doesn't move. All right. Take something, put into your EDGER pad. All right. I bought this punch, just part of the reason for this. I like it better than a screwdriver. It's a little bit thicker. If I wail on it with a hammer, it holds up better. And I'm not destroying all my screwdrivers in my toolbox. All right. You take, I have a boring hammer on hand. You could use a regular hammer like this if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. And you're just gonna hit it, comes right off. All right. So that's our EDGER pad. The other thing you want to notice is you got these two seals, okay, that are underneath the shaft of your EDGER pad. And what those are actually for is, a long time ago, our EDGER pads, they were just stamped. Nothing was milled on them. They were just stamped. And what would happen is they're aluminum, cast aluminum, and they sit right up against a steel race in here. So what happened is the EDGER pads, the aluminum would seize up against the steel. So what we started to do was we actually started putting these washers in there to prevent that from happening, so that when you do need to take your EDGER pad off and service your machine, you were able to get your EDGER pad off with a little bit more ease than you used to. Okay, so you want to always make sure that these go back on after you swap out your EDGER pad. Okay, underneath there, okay, this is one thing that I see a lot of guys do. How many guys out there take their EDGERs and they run a piece of Velcro or something around here to prevent this from rubbing up against the wall or from scratching the baseboard, whatever. If this doesn't move freely, that means you have bigger issues. Okay, so what you want to do is, okay, when you get your EDGER pad off, you want to come in here and take these screws out. Okay. Once you get those screws off, you have your retaining ring. That's what this is called, the retaining ring. Okay, and then your whole roller guard should come off. Okay, so again, brand new, so it's going to be a little snug. But this is your roller guard, okay? So let me lay this on its side here so you guys could see. Now, RJ, if you wanted to check these three screws right here, okay, that's where your jack shaft sits with your gears and all your grease. I don't really recommend opening them up yourself. I recommend, bringing your machine to an authorized service center and letting them do that. Because once you start getting into pulling bearings and stuff like that, you should really have a press or, gear puller, things like that. So I wouldn't recommend that you go too deep into that. I'm going to get a rag. Give me 1 second. Okay, now with this, your roller guard, if this is binding up on you and it's not spinning freely, I recommend you take it off. Just take a clean rag. That's probably not a good example of a clean rag, but here's one. Okay, clean rag, and you just want to wipe it down. It's got a brass ring in here. You see, that's brass, and that's made because you're running up against a cast aluminum part here. So the brass will actually keep it from seizing up, and it'll keep it running smoothly. Okay, so what we want to do is you just want to wipe it down. Just wipe this down with a clean rag. Nothing else, no chemicals. Definitely no WD-40. There you go, Lori. Yes, it's called the jack shaft. All right, so once we get that all wiped down, we're going to put it back on, and as you can see, it spins nice and free. Okay, if again, if you have a guy or one of your guys or you put something across there, tape, Velcro, whatever it may be, you want to take that off of there. The reason being is this is designed to run nice and smoothly right up against your baseboard and protect the baseboard and your edger. Okay, a lot of guys will complain about, oh well, you know, my edger is actually cutting into the baseboard. Well, that's not because of this. That's actually because your edger pad doesn't have a proper lip on it anymore. Okay, so this proper lip, okay, is what you want. So you could see how it comes all the way to that nice point there? That's what you want, because what's going to happen is your paper is going to come up nice and flush right there, and it's not going to allow your paper to hit the base, okay? So what happens is when you lose that lip, the paper actually rolls up on the edge like that, and that's what's actually cutting into your base. So if you're cutting into your base, you need a new edger pad, okay? And what you'll actually start to find is, you know, if you run a crew and have several people working for you, when you replace that edger pad, and that guy goes and doesn't set a nail or hits it and rips that brand new lip right off the edger pad, you're going to be very upset. So you want to make sure you set all those nails, remove all those staples, whatever it is that you got on the floor that could potentially, you know, take that lip off of your edger pad. You want to make sure you do away with that. Okay. So now we got that tightened down. Okay. We're going to go ahead and put our washers back in. Okay, make sure they're seated all the way down. And put our edger pad back on. Okay, again, we're gonna lock our screws in, our fan, our armature, just tighten this down. You don't have to go crazy because once you touch it to the floor, it's actually going to tighten up a little bit more on its own. Okay, put our paper bolt and paper clamp back on. Now we flip it over. Put our light bulb back in. Put our heat shield back on. Our light cover will go right back on. Just like that, nice and snug. Again, make sure you got that seal. Okay, it goes on your screw, your countersunk screw. Put your cap back on. Tighten it down. Now we're ready to sand. Okay. Now that that's on, I'll give you guys a quick little demonstration on if you want how to dress your edger pad. This edger pad's dressed probably 2, maybe 3 times already, so I'll do a real brief explanation. So when I say pocket change, very specifically mean 3 pennies for your Super 7R, and for your B2, a nickel and a dime. Okay, so a lot of guys like to set up their edger a little bit differently. Everybody's different. Everybody has different preferences. From the factory, your edgers come cutting at 12 o'clock. Okay, so when I say 12 o'clock, this is our edger. You were to look straight down your edger, this is 12 o'clock. Right in front, right here. That's 12 o'clock. That's where every edger from the factory, whether it's a B2 or Super 7, that's where they're going to cut. Okay? I personally like to run my edgers a little bit back here, like 1130. That's just the way I run it personally. For B2, because I like to run it at 1130, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nickel and my dime, okay, and I'll show you behind here. You want to make sure your wheels are in the same position, okay. I want to put right under the frame, right here, but right in front of the wheel. I want to take my nickel, and if I'm looking behind the edger, this is going to be the right side. I'm going to put my nickel there, and on the left side, I'm going to put my dime right in front of the wheel, okay, right underneath the base of the edger. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'll loosen these up, and I'll actually set it so it's right there. Hold this down, tighten it up. Now I have my set. Okay, when I do that, all right, I'll go in depth. I'll go all the way for you guys just because I love you all. All right, so we're going to loosen this up just like this. Okay, now over here we have our set screws as well. Okay, we're going to loosen them up too. This is just a 1/2 inch wrench that I'm using right now. You could use a socket, or you can use a an open end wrench, box end, whatever you want. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll loosen up these set screws and loosen this a little bit more so it's free. All right, this is your wheel adjustment here. Okay, so now that it's loosey-goosey, you guys can see. I'll wipe this off. We're going to do our nickel, going to do our dime. Nickel there, dime here. Now, if you wanted your edger to cut more towards 1230, you'd swap the nickel and the dime. Okay, the nickel's thicker, so it's going to create the edger to sit up more on the right side and cut a little bit towards 1130. And if you swap that, the nickel's going to be again thicker, but it'll be on the left side, so it'll cause the edger to cut a little bit more towards 130. Okay, so now that we have our coins here set exactly where we want, take our 1/2 inch. Okay, we want to hold down on the brush block assembly, or not the brush block, the wheel assembly here. And I always like to tighten the left wheel first, the left nut first. The reason for that is it doesn't allow the bracket to kick up. If I was to do the right one, sometimes just tightening down the screw will lift up that left wheel a little bit. So I actually like to tighten that left wheel, that left screw first while holding it down. Okay. Now it's nice and tight. Okay, just snug them down. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to use our set screws here, and we're just going to turn them up till they get snug. And what that's going to do is that's going to hold the place of our adjustment that we just made. Okay, and just make sure they're snug. And basically what these two set screws are, they're sitting right on these two bolts. Okay, so once they're snug, we can tighten these back up, these lock nuts. All right, put our edger right back down, put our dust skirt back on. Boom. Now we're ready to dress our edger pad. So we're setting up our edger here. What I'm going to do is I have a sock with some powder in it. I use that to just powder up the edger pad so I can see the footprint of where the machine is actually cutting. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make sure that the wheels are on the sandpaper, and I'm going to run this to see my initial cut. Okay, so as we can see, cutting a little bit more than we want it to. So what we're actually going to do is I'm actually going to take out the paper bolt and clamp. And we're gonna let the edger wheels hang off the side. Repowder this. Let the edger wheels hang off the side, and what that's doing is it's taking away that 2-degree angle of deflection that the edger pad has, and it's just going to allow us to sand out the center of this pad. All right, so when you do this, you want to make sure you got a good hold on the edger, because it's going to want to jump out of your hands. Okay, now that we did that, we got all this hot rubber in here that we want to get out. Okay, so what we're going to do is just tap it. Make sure you get all that out, because what will happen is if you don't get all that out, once it cools down, it'll actually could stick inside those grooves and could throw the balance of your edger pad off a little bit. So once we get all that out, we'll repowder it, and we'll see where she's cutting. Okay, a little bit more. Let's see here. Again, this edger pad's been dressed a few times, more than I would like. But we're still cutting way too much. So I'm going to do the center again. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3. I'm cutting a little bit into the 4th. And yeah, as you can see, there's a little bit in the 4th, but that's okay because it's not much and we have the first 3 rings cutting. So I would say that this edger is probably ready to go. Put our paper bolt and clamp back on. And we'll do one more. Make sure we get all of that crap out of there. There we go. Everything's out. We're ready to go and sand. Okay. We put that back in the case. We're ready to go.